Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Crime Unveiled with Courtney Bennett. Tonight, we're actually going to talk about a decision that came down today from the Michigan Court of Appeals, and it actually denied the request made by Oxford High School. The shooter, his attorney, made a request asking the appeals court for a resentencing and for that guilty plea to be removed. Both of those things were denied. I spoke to an attorney earlier today, not related to this case. She offered insight as to what happens now and what this appeal means for the future in this case, and if more appeals could happen. I'm going to play that interview right now for you. We heard today from the Michigan Court of Appeals that Ethan Crumbley's appeal is being denied. Was that expected?
Yes, and it's important to remember that in Michigan, if a defendant pleads guilty, they don't have an automatic right to appeal the way they would if there was a jury conviction. And so in Michigan, for a plea-based conviction to be appealed, the defense has to file what's called leave to appeal. In other words, permission to appeal. And in reviewing the court's order today, they indicated that that motion for leave to appeal was denied because they found no meritorious claim.
Where does it go from here? Does it just end right here?
Well, remember that the leave to appeal was specifically for withdrawing the guilty plea and or resentencing. That does not mean that there could still be other appellate issues that Mr. Crumbly will try to take up through the Court of Appeals or eventually to the Michigan Supreme Court.
When it comes to cases like these, I know that his attorney filed on behalf of him back in January with the Court of Appeals. Is there a certain time frame that had to be done before it expired?
Yes, there are very specific deadlines for when someone has to submit and file leave to appeal, and it's usually so many days after the judgment of sentencing. Now, parties can ask for an extension, and even once they filed their notice of appeal, they can ask for an extension in the brief deadline because there will also be strict deadlines given by the Court of Appeals for when the parties have to submit their briefs. So it can get extended that way, but it always has to be with permission of the court.
When it comes to these two specific causes that they've asked the Court of Appeals for the leave for appeal, could those two things go to the Michigan Supreme Court?
Well, there hasn't been an adjudication of those issues in the Michigan Court of Appeals. Again, they just said those two issues, we're not going to send it back for resentencing. We're not going to let him withdraw his guilty plea. So there has to be something from the appellate court to appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, there are some exceptions where you can appeal directly to the Supreme Court, and I think we'll need to see what the next step is now that this order has been entered by the Michigan Court of Appeals.
Could this just continue to go on like for years, or does it have a certain statute of limitations when it comes to filing appeals?
That's a great question. Eventually, what we refer to is a defendant exhausting all of his appellate remedies. Now, there's not necessarily a definitive timeline on that. We look at it from issues. Has a Court of Appeals ruled on a specific issue? And once they have, is that appealable to the next level of appellate review? So we look at it not so much from days as much as has there been some sort of decision or ruling by that court that can then be reviewed by the next higher court.
And that was Tanya Kraus-Phelan from Cooley Law School. She's a dean there as well as a law professor. So let me just take you back. So this appeal was originally made to the Michigan Court of Appeals in January. It came 1 month after an Oakland County Circuit Court judge denied those same requests. So the shooter's attorney made that plea to the circuit court. Circuit court judge says no, the sentencing as well as that guilty plea will stand. Then 1 month later, this motion is filed with the Court of Appeals. And now we are looking at May 6th, where we heard from the Court of Appeals, and they said in one line, it said that this lacked any kind of merit. One thing that this motion filing, I went through it today, and what it said inside was the attorney believed that the shooting suspect had a fetal alcohol syndrome. That was one thing that she says that the court overlooked during the course of his Miller hearings, and also for him entering that guilty plea. That guilty plea was entered in October of 2022, nearly 1 year after the shooting that happened November of 2021. So he pleads guilty in that Oakland County Circuit Courtroom, October of 2022. That summer, over the course of days, there was a Miller hearing that was held. So this is summer of 2023. In December of 2023, that's when we learned that the shooter would be spending the rest of his life behind bars without the possibility of parole. And then, of course, these appeals came after that. So right now, it's not clear on what other appeals we could see within this case, as Tanya had mentioned, that it is possible that they try to appeal on other issues, but right now it is a wait and see. So from the Michigan Court of Appeals, they are denying the resentencing. They are denying the removal of that guilty plea for the Oxford High School shooting suspect. Now, that shooting in November of 2021, which he has now pled guilty to and has been convicted of, it left 4 students dead: Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. It injured 6 other students as well as a teacher and traumatized an entire community. And during his sentencing back in December of 2023, we did hear from several victims and the families in this case, which is one of the reasons why the judge said that it stands as that life sentence without the possibility of parole. This is something that we have been following since the beginning, and we will continue to follow. So this is one thing that you can see on our website, midmichigannow.com. Follow along, and we'll provide you with the latest information in this case. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for Crime Unveiled with Courtney Bennett. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening.